Welcome back to our neck of the woods. Today's video is going to be about our water. What we have here is pretty standard. If you're not into RVing, you have a water source. You go ahead and connect any garden hose up to it, and it's going to be either a city supply or you can fill it up and you'll have to pump it in. The blue valve that you see in there right now is currently set up to city. What city is, it just has a constant pressure going into the RV, and anytime a valve is opened, pressure's there, water's on tap. When you're out actually driving and going RVing, you need to switch that valve, fill up the onboard tank, and there's a overflow in the back of the RV. When it's full, it'll spill over. You know that it's full, you can continue on your way. When you get to an RV site, you can hook up a local water source, turn that valve again, and again, water will be there. It'll always be on tap. Now, on the inside of the camper, there is an LED panel that when you push it, it'll tell you where your water level's at, so you always know and when you need to fill up. So when we first moved out here, we had to truck in our own water. Down at the local municipality watering source, they charge us $12 per 1,000 gallons, and we had to truck it in. Unfortunately, that got to be a huge pain in the butt, especially in the winter, when you have to disconnect all the lines and the power, trailer it down there, trailer it back. It just wasn't a good source. So last summer, we went ahead and had our well drilled, and that is our watering source now, and so far it's been working out fine. We've got a 4-inch PVC casing going down 140 feet. We are borrowing their pump down at the bottom of the well so that we didn't have to use a brand new one and taking life off of it. They just went ahead and let us borrow it, which we thank them so much for letting us, for them to do that. It's a great pump. It's extremely powerful. It runs off of 240 volts. One issue with it, which actually is a benefit to us, is the valve down in the bottom that keeps water up inside of the line is actually broken. So none of this ends up actually freezing in the winter. If we were to have that valve still be good on the bottom of the pump, it would always have water pressure up in here. Even with the power turned off, this would have probably froze and would have broke, but luckily the water drains back down and goes below the frost line, and we've never had an issue with it freezing or breaking. We got this 125 gallon tank when we first moved out here. Unfortunately, 125 gallons sucks. It's not that big, but we kind of needed it and a pump that day, and we didn't have really any other options. We have that watering tote over there now, which is 275 gallons, and that we picked up for like 50 bucks. Unfortunately, we bought that like a year later, because before we had the well drilled and we got set up here, we were taking that tote in the back of my truck, going and getting water, bringing it back, letting gravity flow it down into the tank over here. But even that's a pain in the butt. Even if you don't have to take a trailer and you can just use the tote, you can only use the tote obviously in the summertime. The time that you would have to go to the watering source, back to here, drain it down in, good chance that part of that tote, or at least the line coming out, would start to freeze, and it wouldn't have worked anyway in the wintertime. Worked fine in the summer, and it works fine when we're using that water to wash our vehicles and stuff like that, but definitely wouldn't recommend it for wintertime use. So the first thing I do is hook up a hose to one of the sides of those outlets, and I run it out to the yard. I do it to kind of purge the line, anything that was sitting down inside of the bottom of the casing or the 2-inch line that actually comes on up. That water sits there for about 5 to 6 days before we have to refill the storage tank. So I go ahead and let that run out, clean out the line before I hook up the filters. That way, any water that goes into those filters, it's not super contaminated, and it keeps our filters lasting just that much longer. So that water's been running for about 5 minutes now. So anything down inside of the well, anything down inside of the line should go ahead and be cleared. As you can see, I do aim it at that tree. That water's pretty powerful, so it definitely likes to make holes in the ground when it's shooting out and down, so that tree kind of just blocks that from happening. We go ahead and open up the filter valve now, which obviously cuts down on the water pressure, and we wait until it starts to flow out over there. And then we go ahead and shut this valve down. And now we've got water slowly going out through the filters out into the yard also. I let that run again for around 5 minutes also. That clears out any of the water that's been sitting down in the filters, clears out any of the debris. And I also like to grab this little wooden block here again to help not put a huge hole in the ground from where that water will be flowing. So we're starting to fill the tank up. Doesn't take too long. When we had the well drilled last summer, they did a test. It's a 2-inch line coming from the pump all the way up to the top, and then they put a 1-inch line going out. They ran that for about 45 minutes, and then they tested. The well came back at 16.8 gallons a minute, which is phenomenal for a well. Currently though, since we're going from a 2-inch line neck down to these 1/2-inch copper lines, going back up to a 3/4-inch garden hose, going through 4 large filter medias, filling that tank up is actually only about 8.5 gallons a minute. Still good for a well, but we will go ahead and not have that much pressure drop when we go ahead and get the house, because the well will directly put it into a pressure tank. The pressure tank will be set at a pretty high PSI, supplying water through the filters, through the water softener, through the house. But even then, you've got almost 17 gallons a minute going into our pressure tank. We should have no problem for years to come on that well that we've had done. I forgot, I did want to talk about the driveway. I said I was going to in the last video, and I didn't. So what we did here is the topsoil around here is pretty thick. It's pretty soft. We went ahead and excavated all that and got it all down to what's pretty much a very hard compacted clay down there. The next thing we did, which I see a lot of people not do, which is why they get huge holes in their driveways, probably because the dirt under there is softer than what may be on the other side. Not to mention, obviously, vehicle traffic is going to play into that too. But if you've got a soft spot in the ground and you get a divot, the way to take care of that is you either keep packing in stone and stone and stone, which gets expensive and annoying over time, or you lay down a road fabric. Our road fabric that we got is 300 feet long and 12.5 feet wide. It was only $500. Now, sure, some people may think that $500 is a lot of money, but to be able to have a driveway that will never get a dip, because that road fabric acts as kind of like a catcher's mitt through the entire driveway. If you do have a soft spot where there's like sand, if you've got that road fabric there, the stones can't fall down. It really just catches it like a net. So it keeps your driveway lasting years longer with less maintenance. So $500 goes a long way, since an entire truckload of stone right now in 2020 costs somewhere around $500 a load. it pretty much pays for itself with just in one load if you don't have to resurface your driveway with new stone. So definitely an investment that I think that everyone should go ahead and do, especially if you live in a swampy kind of wet area like we do. The other thing that we went ahead and did is our driveway, like I just said, is 12.5 feet long. Most country driveways, they really only make them the width of tire tracks. The reason why we went with 12.5 feet is I don't like the look of a skinny driveway, and I don't like having guests over where everyone has to park down the driveway. And let's say they come over for Christmas. You don't want to get out of your car and step in snow or mud or fresh cut grass and ruin a pair of white shoes. So 12.5 feet wide is plenty wide enough that both car doors can fully open. Everyone can get out and shut the car doors, walk by everyone's car, not have to step into the grass, not worry about having to scratch someone else's car with your keys or purse or whatever else that you may be walking by with. So 12.5 feet wide, it's plenty of room for dump trucks and semi trucks and any visitors that may come over. The other thing about that road fabric and the way that we did our stone is we went, I think, standard what everybody does, big number 2s and then a 304. If you're not familiar with a 304 mix, basically it's powder all the way up to like number 57. After the first rain, the water takes that dust, and again, from dust all the way up, every single size up to 57, it takes it down and embeds it in that number 2. First time it rained, this driveway hardened like concrete. And after seeing the heaviest vehicle that we've had back here, which was the well driller, I believe they said it was over 60,000 pounds. This driveway didn't move. Nothing does. So once all of the construction is done, we will go ahead and top 57 on top of that. So again, we went about a good foot or so down to a hard clay, went ahead and laid down a road fabric, number 2s, 304, and then we'll lay 57 on top of that. Right now the driveway is pretty much even with the grass, but we will go ahead and bring 57 up above that, so that way any water that runs through the yard, through the grass, it'll go under the 57 on top of the 304 and then kind of drain out. The 304 does drain, but because it is a powder and mixes down in there, and it does harden pretty tight and pack in pretty tight, in a heavy rainstorm it will start to build up and you will see what looks like a puddle, but then as soon as it's done raining, within about 20 minutes that water's gone. But when you put in that 57, the 57s are big enough that any rivers or puddles that are under that 57 sitting on that 304, you won't see it, and even in a heavy rainstorm your driveway will just always look perfect. So we're all done. Tank's full. The only thing left to do now, break down all the hoses, store them away. I do take the end of the one garden hose and tie it in to the one that fills the tank up, so they're connected together. That way all of the hose and all of the filters are locked off. They don't receive oxygen. That way, and just in case things do start to grow, obviously some bacteria need oxygen, some don't, but a little bit of extra insurance. Every now and again inside of that tank we will build up a little bit of sediment. It's an orangish color. I think it's iron. I did drop a magnet down in there to see if it would stick to it. Any experienced well people out there, please let me know if what that might be. Again, it's orangish color. It almost looks like a orange algae kind of. I think it's just absolute microscopic particles of iron that are sitting down in there. Obviously when we go ahead and get the water softening system and real filters, 6 foot tall for actual whole houses, that'll cut down and pretty much should take our iron to 0. I may still use those filters in there. I'll have to use the arsenic filter for sure, but as for the heavy metal iron and stuff like that, not sure if I'll go ahead and use that or not. It just depends on how good of a water system that we get and install it down into the house. But I would like some expert opinions to see what that might be for that orangish color. So every 2 to 3 tanks full, I go ahead and suck out everything down inside of the storage tank and with a shop vac, and just dump it out in the yard, so that way it doesn't just keep up building thicker and thicker and coating the sides of the walls. I am curious how most of you people out there that have wells, how you go ahead and deal with stuff like that, because if there's always something down inside of your well and it's going from the well into the pressure tank inside of the house, how long does a pressure tank last? It's kind of worrisome to know that I've got all those filters before I go to a storage tank, and when we do the house, that's not the way that it's going to be set up. On the house, it's going to go from the well to a pressure tank, then to filters, then to the softener and stuff like that. That worries me how long that pressure tank's going to last, with just how much debris and whatever may be down inside of that well is going to build up and eventually just destroy the pressure tank over time. Again, I don't have experience with this. If someone can chime in the comments and let me know, pressure tanks are good for 5 to 10 years, but regardless, they will need changed out. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'd like to see what you guys have experience with.